Tutankhamun's spectacular treasures. Now, for the first time since they were discovered, all 5,398 objects are being brought together. Scientists have been using the latest imaging and forensic technology to unlock long-buried mysteries.
What if the face the world worships doesn't belong to the boy king himself? November 26, 1922, Howard Carter opens the tomb of Tutankhamun.
In October 1925, after 3 years of excavating Tutankhamun's tomb, Howard Carter and his team begin to open the king's coffin.
A chamber sealed for 3,000 years. Gold flashes in the candlelight, history is rewritten in an instant. But nearly a century later, a quantum question haunts Egyptology. Was the golden mask really Tutankhamun's, or was it made for someone else, a ruler erased from history? This is the story no one saw coming. Tutankhamun's hidden truth. To understand why anyone would question the mask, you first have to understand the mess that surrounded the burial. Ancient Egyptian funerary practice was not improvised. It was one of the most elaborate, codified ritual systems in human history.
It has been said that ancient Egypt was a culture of death.
When a pharaoh died, the body was taken to the embalmers, where it underwent a mummification process that lasted approximately 70 days. During those 70 days, an army of craftsmen, priests, and administrators prepared the tomb. Walls were painted. The furniture was gilded. Canopic jars were inscribed. The Book of the Dead was copied onto papyrus and placed in the correct position.
Book of the Dead, a 78-foot papyrus scroll. Such funerary texts were originally written only for pharaohs.
Every amulet, every figurine, every sacred text had a designated location, and the entire operation was choreographed with a precision that would make a modern logistics company envious. This system worked beautifully when there was time. Tutankhamun's burial did not have time. He died suddenly, almost certainly unexpectedly, around 1323 BCE. He was 18 or 19 years old.
This is not the tomb of an old ruler. Later research suggests he died age 19.
The cause of death has been debated for decades. Malaria, a broken leg, a genetic disorder from generations of royal inbreeding, possibly a combination. What is not debated is that his death was not anticipated. There was no long illness during which preparations could begin. One day the king was alive, shortly after he was not. And the 70-day clock started ticking. The first sign that something went wrong is the tomb itself. Tutankhamun was buried in KV 62, a tomb, in the Valley of the Kings, that is, by royal standards, astonishingly small.
And the Valley of the Kings, the final resting places of powerful pharaohs.
It has only 4 chambers. Compare that to the tomb of his probable grandfather, Amenhotep III, which has over 100, or the tomb of Seti I, which stretches nearly 500 feet into the rock. KV 62 looks less like a pharaoh's eternal resting place and more like a nobleman's side room that was hastily upgraded for a king who needed somewhere to go. Many Egyptologists believe that's exactly what it was. The leading theory is that the tomb was originally prepared for a non-royal official, possibly I, who would become pharaoh after Tut, and was repurposed.
I seized the moment. I crowned himself pharaoh and decreed that when he died, he would take Tutankhamun's tomb.
When the young king died without a finished tomb of his own. But the tomb is only the beginning. When Carter catalogued the objects inside, he found something that troubled him even then, though he didn't fully articulate it. Many of the burial goods showed signs of alteration. Cartouches, the oval frames containing a pharaoh's name, had been recarved. Items designed for one person had been relabeled for another. The second of the 3 nested coffins appeared stylistically different from the other 2, as though it had been manufactured for a different burial and retrofitted to match. Even the canopic coffinettes, the miniature gold coffins that held the king's preserved organs.
Inside it, 2 more coffins. The innermost, made of solid gold and covered in gemstones,
showed faces that some scholars argue look nothing like the outer mask and may represent a different individual entirely. The burial, in short, was a patchwork, a greatest hits collection of funerary equipment grabbed from multiple sources and assembled under extreme time pressure by people who needed a dead king in the ground before the 70 days ran out. And then there are the ears. The golden mask has pierced ears. Small holes, clearly intentional, drilled through the gold lobes. In the artistic conventions of the 18th dynasty, pierced ears on a royal image had a specific meaning. They indicated a woman or a child, adult. Male pharaohs were not depicted with pierced ears. Tutankhamun was buried as an adult king. His other representations, statues, relief carvings, do not show pierced ears. So why does the most important object in his burial have them? There are explanations. Some scholars argue that the convention was not as rigid as we assume, or that Tut may have been depicted with pierced ears because he became king as a young child. These are reasonable positions, but they don't eliminate the question, they just make it more interesting. Because if the mask wasn't made for Tutankhamun, there is really only one candidate in the 18th dynasty who fits every criterion. A royal woman of supreme status, closely connected to Tutankhamun's family, whose own burial equipment has never been found. A queen who disappeared. The Vanishing Queen. Her full name was Neferuaten Nefertiti. It means beautiful are the beauties of Aten, the beautiful one has come. Even by Egyptian standards, that is a name designed to make you remember it. She was the great royal wife of Akhenaten.
She married Amenhotep's second son, the new pharaoh, Akhenaten. As his queen, Nefertiti became the most powerful woman in all of Egypt.
The so-called heretic pharaoh who dismantled Egypt's traditional religion and replaced it with the worship of a single god. The Aten, the sun disk. Together they launched a revolution. They abandoned the old capital of Thebes, built an entirely new city called Akhetaten, modern Amarna, and positioned themselves not just as rulers, but as the sole intermediaries between humanity and the divine. It was the closest thing the ancient world ever saw to a monotheistic revolution, and Nefertiti was at the center of it. She was not a decorative queen. The surviving art from Amarna shows her in roles that no Egyptian queen had occupied before.
King Akhenaten and his wife looked completely different than all the other ancient Egyptian kings.
She is depicted smiting enemies, a pose reserved exclusively for pharaohs. She appears in scenes of worship, standing equal to her husband, not behind him. On at least one Talatat block from Karnak, she is shown wearing the pharaoh's crown. Not a queen's crown, the pharaoh's crown. Some scholars interpret this as ceremonial symbolism. Others believe she held actual co-regency, governing alongside Akhenaten with full royal authority. And then she vanished. Around year 12 of Akhenaten's reign, Nefertiti disappears from the historical record. Her name stops appearing in inscriptions. Her image stops appearing on monuments. The silence is sudden and total, like a light switch being flipped. For over a century, the dominant explanation was simple. She died. Plague was sweeping through Egypt at the time. Several of her daughters seem to have died in this period. It was assumed she fell to the same epidemic. But there is no record of her death, no record of her burial, no funerary inscription, no tomb has ever been conclusively identified as hers. For a woman of her status, arguably the most powerful queen in Egyptian history, this absence is extraordinary.
Nefertiti is depicted as being more powerful than previous queens, sometimes even pictured with the crown of a pharaoh.
Queens of far lesser importance have left extensive burial records. Nefertiti left nothing, or rather, nothing that has been found, unless it was found in 1922 inside the tomb of her stepson, wearing a different name. The theory that Nefertiti did not die in year 12, but instead assumed a new identity and ruled as pharaoh in her own right, is not fringe speculation. It is supported by a significant body of evidence. After Akhenaten's death, a shadowy figure known as Smenkhkare appears briefly on the throne. Some Egyptologists believe Smenkhkare was a male relative. Others, including prominent scholars like Dr. Joanne Fletcher, Nicholas Reeves, and Mark Gabolde, believe Smenkhkare was Nefertiti herself, ruling under a throne name, as had happened with Hatshepsut centuries earlier. If that theory is correct, then Nefertiti was alive and reigning when Tutankhamun was being prepared for power. She may have been the one who oversaw the transition. She may have had royal burial equipment, a golden mask, coffins, canopic jars, already in production for her own eventual funeral. And if she died before Tutankhamun, or if the political situation changed and her identity was deliberately erased, then her unused burial equipment would have been sitting in a workshop somewhere in the Valley of the Kings, available, ready-made, and exactly the kind of thing a panicked funeral administration—
It must have been quite a rushed burial. The king died young, and so I think they were trying to cram in all the appropriate equipment.
—might reach for when a teenage king dropped dead without warning, and the 70-day clock was already counting down. This is the theory, and for years it remained exactly that. A theory built on inference, on the absence of evidence rather than its presence. A theory that was intellectually compelling but physically unverifiable, until someone broke the beard off the mask. The beard incident. In August 2014, something happened at the Egyptian Museum in Cairo that would have been funny if it hadn't been catastrophic. A museum worker, accounts vary on whether it was during cleaning, relocation, or a lighting adjustment, accidentally knocked the braided gold beard off the mask of Tutankhamun. The beard, a ceremonial false beard attached to the chin of the mask, had been secure for over 3,000 years. It survived tomb robbers, Howard Carter's extraction, 2 world wars, and the Egyptian Revolution. It did not survive a clumsy moment in a display case. What happened next made it worse. Rather than report the damage through official channels and bring in qualified conservators, museum staff attempted an immediate repair.
King Tut's mask had been properly repaired after being damaged. The museum admitted it wasn't so.
They used epoxy, commercial, quick-drying, hardware store epoxy, on the most valuable archaeological artifact on Earth. The adhesive was applied unevenly. It left visible residue on the chin. It seeped into the joint where the beard met the face. When photos of the repair surfaced internationally, the reaction was a mixture of horror and disbelief. 8 museum employees were eventually charged. A German-Egyptian conservation team was brought in to remove the epoxy and perform a proper restoration. But the beard incident, as humiliating as it was, had an unintended consequence. It gave scientists physical access to the mask at a level of detail that had never been possible before. The conservation team didn't just reattach the beard. They examined the mask using X-ray fluorescence spectroscopy.
X-rays and high-resolution CTs were taken of the mask of the youngest king in ancient Egypt.
Detailed photographic mapping and close visual analysis under controlled laboratory conditions. For the first time since Carter's discovery, the mask was studied not as a museum treasure, but as a metallurgical object with a physical history that could be read in its surface. The official results, published in 2015, were measured. The conservation team reported that they found no definitive evidence of the mask being altered, no second face beneath the gold, no obvious signs of re-inscription on the scale that some theorists had predicted. The beard, they noted, appeared to have been attached separately from the face, which could indicate different manufacturing stages, but did not necessarily prove different original ownership. Case closed. That was the headline. The mask was Tut's. The theory was interesting but unsupported, except not everyone agreed. Dr. Nicholas Reeves, a British Egyptologist who had spent decades studying the artifacts from K-Vafi 62, published a detailed analysis in which he argued that the conservation team's findings actually supported the alteration hypothesis rather than refuting it. He pointed to differences in the gold alloy between the face and the headdress, variations that, he argued, were consistent with a face being reworked or replaced while the rest of the mask remained unchanged. He noted that the cartouche on the mask, the inscription bearing Tutankhamun's name, showed signs of recarving that were visible even in the conservation photographs.
Months ago, and in fact I was looking at the cartouche and I could see that underneath the name of Tutankhamun was the name of another person.
And he pointed out something that the official report had acknowledged but not emphasized. The face of the mask and the Nemes headdress do not appear to have been made as a single piece. They were manufactured separately and joined together. For a mask that was supposedly made as one object for one king, that's an unusual construction method. For a mask that was started for one person and finished for another, It makes perfect sense. The scholarly community split. Some dismissed Reeves as overreading the evidence. Others argued his observations were technically sound, even if his conclusions were speculative. The debate filled journal pages and conference sessions, and it raised a question that technology was only beginning to answer. What if the evidence of alteration isn't on the surface of the mask at all? What if it's inside the metal itself? Secrets buried in gold, gold remembers. That's not poetry, it's metallurgy. When gold is worked, hammered, heated, bent, reshaped, the process leaves traces in the crystal structure of the metal. Grain boundaries shift, stress patterns form. If a piece of gold was shaped into one form and then reworked into another, the original shaping leaves a thermal and mechanical signature that modern scanning technology can, in theory, detect. It's the same principle forensic scientists use when they recover erased serial numbers from firearms. The metal retains a memory of what was done to it, even after the surface has been altered. In the years following the Beard incident, several researchers proposed applying advanced non-invasive imaging techniques to the mask. Neutron tomography, synchrotron X-ray diffraction, techniques that can peer inside a gold object without touching it and map the internal structure with a resolution measured in micrometers. The idea was straightforward. If the mask was originally crafted for a different person and then reworked to fit Tutankhamun, the internal grain structure should show evidence of two distinct shaping events, an original form and a subsequent alteration. This is where the story gets complicated, because the line between what has been done and what has been proposed becomes critically important. As of the most recent published research, full-scale internal metallurgical analysis of the mask has not been completed. The Egyptian authorities, understandably protective of the artifact after the 2014 debacle, have been cautious about authorizing invasive or even non-invasive examinations beyond what was required for the Beard restoration. Proposals have been submitted, discussions have occurred. But the definitive scan, the one that could settle the question, has not yet happened. What has happened is a series of surface-level and compositional analyses that have produced intriguing but inconclusive results. The X-ray fluorescence studies conducted during the 2015 restoration confirmed that the mask is not composed of a single uniform gold alloy. The face contains a slightly different gold composition than the headdress. This could mean many things. It could indicate different workshops, different batches of gold, different stages of production. Or it could indicate that the face was manufactured at a different time, for a different purpose, and later integrated into a headdress that was already complete. Meanwhile, scholars have pointed to the inscriptional evidence. Hieroglyphic analysis of the cartouche on the mask has revealed what some Egyptologists describe as palimpsest characteristics, traces suggesting that the current name was carved over an earlier inscription. The name beneath, if it exists, has been tentatively identified by researchers including Reeves as Ankh-Keperur, a throne name associated with the mysterious Smenkhkare, whom some scholars believe was Nefertiti ruling as pharaoh.
The name of Tutankhamun was the name of another person, and the name was that of Nefertiti as co-regent.
This identification is disputed. Other Egyptologists argue that the supposed traces are ambiguous, that the cartouche shows normal manufacturing marks rather than re-inscription, and that seeing a hidden name requires a degree of interpretive enthusiasm that crosses the line from analysis into projection. The debate is technical, granular, and unresolved. What is not disputed is that the technology to answer the question definitively exists. It's sitting in laboratories around the world, waiting for permission to be applied to 11 kilograms of gold that have been keeping a secret, or not keeping one, for over 3,000 years. And perhaps the most fascinating aspect of this entire investigation is not the answer. It's the resistance to asking the question. What if history was rewritten? If the mask was altered, and that remains an if, not a conclusion, then the question becomes, why? The answer lies in one of the most turbulent periods in Egyptian history, a period so politically toxic that later pharaohs tried to erase it from the record entirely. When Akhenaten died, he left behind a theological catastrophe. His monotheistic revolution had alienated the powerful priesthood of Amun. The new capital at Amarna was politically isolated. The empire's vassal states were in revolt, sending desperate letters, the Amarna letters, which survive to this day, begging for military help that never came. Egypt was weakened, divided, and theologically fractured. The rulers who followed Akhenaten had one overriding political objective: undo everything he had done. Restore the old gods, restore the old capital, restore the old order, and erase every trace of the Amarna heresy from the record. Tutankhamun was part of this restoration. His original name was Tutankhaten, living image of the Aten. It was changed to Tutankhamun, living image of Amun, to signal the return to orthodoxy. He was a child when he took the throne. He was almost certainly controlled by older advisors, chief among them I, who would become pharaoh after him.
But such a young child could not rule Egypt on his own.
He needed to surround himself with close advisors, essentially, to help him rule as king.
And General Horemheb, who would become pharaoh after I. These were men engaged in a deliberate program of historical revision. The ancient Egyptians had a name for it, or rather the Romans, who later practiced the same thing, had a name for it. Damnatio memoriae, the condemnation of memory, the systematic erasure of a person from the historical record. Names chiseled off monuments, faces scraped from reliefs, statues toppled and buried. The goal was not just to remove someone from the present, but to remove them from eternity. Because in Egyptian theology, to have your name destroyed was to cease to exist in the afterlife. Akhenaten suffered damnatio memoriae. His name was removed from king lists. His monuments were dismantled. His city was abandoned and eventually buried under the sand. And if Nefertiti ruled as pharaoh after him, if she was Smenkhkare, continuing the Aten heresy under a new name, then she would have been subject to the same erasure. Now imagine the scenario. Nefertiti dies. She has been ruling as pharaoh. Burial equipment has been prepared for her: a golden mask, coffins, canopic jars, all bearing her royal names and titles. Before the burial is complete, or perhaps shortly after, the political winds shift. The Amun restoration gains power. Nefertiti's reign is declared illegitimate. Her name becomes toxic. Her burial goods are seized, re-inscribed, and placed in storage. Then Tutankhamun dies unexpectedly. He's 18 years old. He has no finished tomb. His burial equipment is incomplete. The 70-day window is closing fast, and somewhere in a royal workshop there is a complete set of funerary equipment, golden mask included, that was made for a pharaoh of similar family lineage, similar facial structure, and similar physical stature. All it needs is a new name. This is not a far-fetched scenario. We know with certainty that objects in Tut's tomb were re-inscribed. We know the second coffin was likely made for someone else. We know the canopic coffinettes show a face that doesn't match the outer mask. The pattern of repurposing is not theoretical, it's documented. The only question is how far that pattern extends. Does it extend to the mask itself? To the most iconic object in the tomb? To the face that the world has called Tutankhamun for 100 years? Maybe. Maybe not. The evidence is suggestive, not conclusive. The alloy differences are real, but interpretable multiple ways. The cartouche anomalies are visible but contested. The pierced ears are there but explainable. Each piece of evidence, taken alone, can be argued away. Taken together, they form a pattern that at least one generation of Egyptologists believes deserves a definitive technological answer. And that answer is still waiting. 3,000 years. A mask of gold, a secret that has waited in silence, buried beneath history itself. But history is never finished, and the truth never truly sleeps. What other faces lie hidden beneath the stories we take for granted? What truths have been erased, rewritten, or hidden in plain sight? And when the past speaks, will we be ready to hear it? Every artifact carries a memory, every tomb a whisper, every shadow a story waiting to be uncovered. The mask may be golden, but the secrets it holds are priceless, and they are not done with us yet. How far would you go to uncover what the world has tried to forget?